This story takes place in the deserts of Arizona. Me and my dad are on a camping trip with the rest of our family, but thanks to the size of the family, we had to take two cars. One car's for one boys, and one for girls. I had three sisters, but thanks to the size of the family, we had to take two cars. One car, one for boys and one for girls. I had three sisters, but I was the only boy. 3 hours later, and nightfall approaches, making it harder to drive with only one headlight working. So, my dad decides we should stop and camp there for the night. I said I was down, as long as we sleep in the car. Not really camping, but if you had to choose between a car seat and the ground, then we'll talk. Anyway, he agreed, so we drove off the road and onto the sand with cactus as far as the eye could see. Both began our descent into slumber. Only I couldn't, as I was a bit of an insomniac, which I was fine with. It just meant I could look up at the night sky. But then I heard the blood-curdling screech of some kind of humanoid being howling at the vast emptiness of the desert. At first, I thought it was a coyote, but coyotes don't sound like that at all. Frozen solid, I look out the window to see a tall, lanky creature standing on all fours of its extremely long, unnatural appendages. At first glance, I would have just blended in with the cacti surrounding the area, with its seemingly prickly skin, but I didn't just peek and look away. I was flat out staring at it until my eyes locked with its two small white dots was all I could see. I'm shitting bricks at this point, but bricks turn to boulders as it full-on charges out the small car, which could easily be flipped with little effort. I guess that all the commotion woke up my dad, because before I knew it, we're driving off the sandbank into the road, flooring it the whole way, only to get the back window smashed in with the creature slamming its two-finger hand in the glass screen, sending shards everywhere, even into its own hand. It didn't follow us for much longer, as it had glass shrapnel in its hand, and it started to slow down and limp away, leaving blood marks on the back door. We kept driving without looking back, fearing to see it again. Eventually, we had to stop as we caught up with the rest of the family, and we all shared the same expressions on our faces, the look of terror glued on. That is one day I will never forget. So, I had something pretty weird happen a little over an hour ago. I was standing out by my truck, smoking a cigarette. We have about 7 acres with a small forest in the back portion. My parking spot is beside our metal garage, and you could see the front portion of our land from here as well, as the far corner where the woods are. Well, I was shining my flashlight through the brush. I live in West Georgia. Coyotes have been attacking our dogs and terrorizing our horses. I saw some weird pair of eyes staring at me from a patch of tall grass. I am 6'3", and the grass there goes up to my ears, so this thing had to have been at least 8 feet tall. The eyes were like a blue flame on a torch. I made eye contact with it, and I thought I saw a smaller second pair behind it. I don't usually go outside much after dark, solely because of the threat of coyotes, and whenever we hear something at night, we grab a loaded AR, and I usually walk around and check things out. I had done that earlier today and didn't find anything, but as soon as I come out without the rifle, I see these pair of eyes. What's a way I can protect myself? I don't think a 5.56 is gonna phase a goddamn skinwalker. For the past few nights, a skinwalker has been outside of my house. Last night it started tapping on random windows. Tonight, I was outside and the crickets went silent. My mother and I are generally very spiritual, and so on. Long story short, we know when something evil is nearby. We're in Glendale, Arizona, in case any of you are worried about the location. To give you my first update, my cat was full-on leaning and scratching at the window, trying to get at something. She's very shy and reserved, so this was weird. Second update. My mom woke up early around the time when it was still dark and went outside to smoke a cigarette. She heard whistling, and our new dog was whining and trying to get my mom inside. She was happy to go in. Only the dead whistle at night. Update 3. Someone knocked on the door in broad daylight. I looked outside, but nobody was there. No packages, no bugs, nothing. The knocking sounded urgent and loud. The 4th and final update. My mother still hears whistling every time she goes outside when it's dark, coming from the direction of a building behind our house. I can feel them getting closer each day. My daughter attends the University of Western Florida, and I had just finished getting her settled in her dorm room, stocked up on groceries and other essentials. I left in the late morning to head back home, which is east of Pensacola, some 3+ hours. All through the first hour or so, there were tremendous rain bands like we are used to here in Florida. As I was traveling on Interstate 10, the trailer trucks would put a literal fog of water spray, so I wasn't going more than 50 miles an hour. As I got out of the last rain band, the sky got brighter and brighter to the point where I could get back up to 70 miles an hour. I was still following a car, about 10 car lengths. I checked the rear view and no traffic behind, and I remember looking around the car ahead and nothing for some distance. I was just about ready to pass the white car when he put his brakes, and I closed distance to him fairly quickly. I braked also, not knowing what was ahead of him. Maybe a truck tire carcass, and he could swerve into my lane and I pass him. Even though I am driving a pickup truck, I ride a motorcycle and sort of drive like I ride, very defensively. As I slowed, I noticed some movement off the road. We were both in the right lane. On the other side of the guardrail, something caught my eye. We had just come over either a swampy area or a small creek, so there was a guardrail over that area. Still, there was a gully between the guardrail and the tree line, maybe 20 feet deep. Almost instantly, I thought bear, but wrong color. Our bear here are jet black, and if they stand and you have the rare chance to see that, they aren't very tall. The next thought I had was a man in a ghillie suit, but wrong again. This was not material, it was hair. Matted down, wet hair. And the height, maybe 8 feet. It was huge. So as I saw it, by this time I was almost stopped. The car ahead directly abeam of the creature and stopped or very slow. What I saw was a living creature, everything articulated perfectly. Head, arms, and legs. I had a profile to a back view of it, saw its muscles in the upper back. The color wasn't exactly uniform, but varied between shades of chocolate brown. The head looked rounded. I couldn't see ears or a neck, but it definitely had a head, and looked down before stepping into the gully. At that time I saw arms that moved, but really saw the separate legs and saw what was matted hair stuck together from the leg. It stepped down, rounded the gully, and out the other side to go into the tree line. Its motion was very smooth, almost like it was gliding. So, even if a man could don a suit and act like an 8-foot-tall living creature, how would he manage to walk down a steep embankment that was grassy and wet? Any human would be on his ass or tumble dangerously down that embankment. Anyway, I hurriedly called the wife, who laughed at me for a minute or two, but then realized I was serious. She said, "Get the license plate of the car," which I didn't, and "Where are you?" I was surprised that I hadn't done all of that. Frankly, I think I was dazed. Well, I know there is someone else that saw this thing, but that is about all. I would estimate this thing weighed about 400 to 500 pounds. It wasn't fat or barrel-chested. It wasn't skinny either, like it didn't have enough to eat. It was healthy and athletic in appearance, and it sure covered a difficult area in no time. By the way, this interstate highway cuts through the England. I'll start off by saying no, this isn't my story, but it was such a crazy enough encounter that I have asked each of my friends throughout the years to recount the events. This happened around the year 2000. After about a year after this took place, I started dating one of these friends, and that's when I first heard about this dog-wolf story. I have since asked each friend over years and miles apart, and they all remember the exact same encounter. Before my ex was even my boyfriend, let's call him Jay, he and our other friends were about 18 years old. At that age, I remember it being an adventure to find a place to smoke. Let's go hike to so-and-so and smoke. The good old days when we got away from our parents and planned a day around smoking. It was Jay and his best friend B, and their girlfriends S and M. The four of them decided to drive to Mount Pitska, a beautiful wooded area outside of Eugene, Oregon. It's more of a hill, but it's nature in its prime for sure. I've been out there many times growing up, and I know exactly what trail they were on, and the main one that connects the parking lot to the river. They had driven in B's little white sedan, parked in the parking lot, and then walked to the river. On the way to the river from the lot, there is a very small bridge that crosses a small creek, which is relevant for later. The group spent the day out there swimming and puffing and swimming, just being typical Oregonian teens. I can imagine that hunger is what drove them to go home after a few hours as the sun began to set. Either activity alone is bound to get somebody hungry, let alone both. So they walked along the well-worn main dirt path to the parking lot. This path has since been paved, according to Google Maps. It doesn't take but 20 minutes or so for them to get back to the little footbridge by the parking lot that they had crossed when they hiked in. When they reached the small footbridge near the parking lot, B looked out into the vast field between them and the wooded mountain and noticed a huge dog near the tree line, about 100 yards away. They all later described it as the biggest dog they had ever seen. The dog was just sitting there, not looking scary, just looking like a humongous friendly dog. It was starting to get dark from M and J's descriptions, and the drawing she did for me later in 2005. It was very shaggy and furry. I may even still have that notebook where she drew the dog thing. If I find it, I'll send it to you. My friends continued to walk across this small wooden bridge, and one of the girls screamed. The big dog was now on its hind legs, standing much closer than they had seen it before. It had traversed most of the large field in seconds it took them to get across this 10-foot-long bridge. Whatever this was, it was fast, quiet, and stealthy. My four friends ran to the car, and they had the classic cliche, "I can't get the key in," because B was fumbling madly for the keys. At this point, the dog was standing on its hind legs at the very edge of the parking lot, looking at them. Still had the dog face, still had the dog body, just standing up. They never saw it walking on all four, or just two. It was like every time they looked up, it was just standing there, closer. As Jay had said, every time they looked up, he was closer but not moving. All of them recounted how surreal it was to see a dog standing on its hind legs. I don't know if it ran for a few ticks and then stood up again at intervals in the field, but that's the way they describe it. Many times I asked them, "Are you sure it wasn't a bear?" No, it was definitely a dog standing on its hind legs, a big dog that was stalking them. Also, this is in Lane County, Oregon in the year 2000. There are few if any bear out there at all. It would be odd, but then again, I wasn't there. The kids got into the car and sped off, leaving the dog to his own business. I've never had a reason to doubt any of their stories. In fact, S doesn't like to talk about the incident at all, because it's just far too creepy for her to recall. This story is 100% true, and I'm writing it on here to warn other people and let them know that there's definitely something out there, and to this day, I still don't know what it was, nor have I ever gone into any woods or forest whatsoever. If you don't believe me, that's completely fine. Read this as a fun story at your own expense. But for those of you out there with an open mind, or you've seen something yourself, just know you are not alone. And just typing out and remembering this account is causing me to shake with anxiety and fear. First off, I'm a girl and live in North Carolina of the United States. I was 15 at the time of my encounter and was definitely not a believer in anything supernatural, paranormal, or anything of the sort. It happened while I was at a local summer camp. There was absolutely nothing special about that day. No weird lights, people, animals, sounds, nothing. It was just the same camp schedule as I'd grown used to in the past 2 weeks I'd been there. My age group had just finished lunch and was about to be able to persuade our counselor to let us play a game called Scatter Down by the Lake. It's like a giant hide and seek in the woods. Now, we had played this at least 20 times before that day, and nothing weird had happened to any of us, and we all grew up playing in the woods, so it's not like we had any aversion or fear of it. But for some reason that day, when our counselor shouted, "Scatter!" and I ran to find a hiding place, it became a whole new ballgame. I had run as far as I could while still being able to see the lake, as were the rules, and had found a huge old uprooted tree that I decided would be the perfect hiding place. So, I laid down as close as I could against the ground and waited. I had been there for about 5 minutes when I suddenly heard a voice calling my name in a weird dreamy-like voice, and not just any voice, my mom's. Now, me and my mom are extremely close, thick as thieves, so I'd know her voice anywhere, and I would swear on my own grave it was without a doubt hers. But I knew it couldn't be her. She was 20 miles away at work, and even if it had actually been her, she'd come to pick me up early. The voice wasn't coming from the lake. It was coming from further out in the woods, beyond the border of the camp. I knew I should have run away from this strange mimic mom voice, but I couldn't. It was almost hypnotic. It messed with my thoughts and gave me doubts, like, well, it could be mom, or what if she's hurt, and I have to get her now. All these things were flooding into my mind, like somebody had broken a dam and I didn't know it was there, until they finally overwhelmed me and emotions got the better of me, and I took off running in the direction the voice was coming from. I ran as far as I could with only this strange voice as my guide. I couldn't have run for more than 5 or 7 minutes when I got to a clearing, and the voice suddenly stopped. When I entered the clearing and didn't hear my mom's voice calling me anymore, I could finally think clearly again and started to have little alarm bells going off in my head saying, "You idiot. That's not mom, and you better run." But I couldn't run. I didn't know where to run. I had gotten so far away, I had lost sight of the lake by camp and had absolutely no idea where I was, and I was completely exhausted to boot. With no other options than to just sit there and catch my breath, I did just that. No sooner had I sat down, more warning bells went off in my mind. I quickly did a 360 survey around the clearing and noticed a strange noise. It wasn't the continuation of the voice before, no. It was the distinct sound of chattering teeth, like if you were cold, only there was no one else around, and it was the middle of June in North Carolina. There's no way someone would be cold. And that's when I heard it. Leaves and sticks crunching on the edge of the small clearing. And I realized something was watching me. And then whatever it was moved fast in circles around the clearing, almost like it was circling prey. And it was at that moment I knew whatever it was had led me out there away from the rest of my group, exactly like the predator instincts had been screaming at me that it was. Without any other option, I tried to escape. I took off in the direction I thought I came from and sprinted as fast as I could, all the while hearing the chittering of teeth and sticks crunching behind me. I didn't know what to do. I didn't dare turn around and see what was chasing me. I knew that if I did, I would slow down, and I absolutely would not. It felt like a lifetime running away from this thing before I finally saw the lake. And even though I didn't think I could run any faster, I ran faster than I ever have in my life. When I broke the tree line and ran to the lake where I knew my friends were, at that point, I felt safe enough to stop and look back and see just what had been chasing me. but when I did, I only saw a fleeting form running back the way I had come, and the distinct sound of chittering teeth. When I finally found my counselor, who was the seeker to find all of us, I was hysterical with fear and hugged her as tight as I could. When I finally calmed down, she tried to get me to tell her what happened, but I just asked, "Were you calling my name?" Before she even said anything, I already knew the answer. After all, it had been my mom's voice that led me away from everyone else. But what she said, replied with, was so much more bone-chilling to me. She told me, "No one called for you. We didn't even know you were gone. Everyone is still hiding. The game isn't even over yet." I've had strange experiences since I was a kid, but this was definitely the most terrifying one. I had been living in the Middle East for about 4 years at that time. I got back from work one night, had dinner, watched TV, and went to bed after midnight. I hadn't fallen asleep yet. I'm 100% sure I was awake and aware of everything around me. I was just lying in bed, on my side, one hand under the pillow, facing the edge of the bed, and thinking about what had to be done the next day, when I felt something warm near me. The same way you can feel the warmth of a body very close to you, even though it isn't touching you. This thing didn't touch me. It started breathing deeply, so close to my neck I could feel its warm breath on my skin. And it spoke. I can immediately identify the Arabic language, even though I can't speak it. But this thing didn't speak Arabic. It was something else. Similar, but something else. And it wasn't like this had lips or even a physical body. For the way it spoke, it's like its voice came directly from the creature's throat and sounded like a growl. Very guttural. My reaction was instinctive. I remember the fear I felt down my spine and the scream that I let out. I just kicked and punched in the air, pushing myself away from that thing. I was up in a flash and turned the light on. There was nothing there. Of course, my heart was racing. I was scared to death and I couldn't stop crying. I had to turn the TV on and watch silly cartoons till the sun came up. Later on, I told my partner at the time. He's a Muslim, and he was convinced it was a jinn. I'm not a religious person, but I do believe there's more out there than just the things our senses can feel. I have another story from when I was very young. It's not related, but friends also think I've encountered another jinn. If your fan base is interested, I could also share that experience. Has anyone experienced a similar occurrence? Last night, I posted about seeing something strange. Today, after I got home from school, I investigated the area. The brush is actually taller than 7 feet due to a shallow dip in the ground. What got my attention is that there's a small game trail for rabbits or maybe a coyote. I know the horses aren't to blame because I couldn't fit there. There was quite a bit of small bushes that were flattened by something. There was not any other damage around it, and whatever was there would have had to disturb the brush growing above the flattened bushes. It's all tangled briars at the top. Whatever was there had to have been either behind said brush or somehow hovering over the brush. There's an old oak stump with new tree growth on it, but it doesn't reach that far over. So, we talked to our neighbors, and on that specific night, they were in our shop, working on a car. They said they had a machine running, so I didn't and would not have heard the noise. Today, they found one of their chickens buried in the snow. They assume it's a bobcat since they have killed 4 in the last month that we've been out there. Supposedly, though we have only seen one that they trapped, and all that was left of the bait chicken was a claw on the side of the cage they trapped him in. The chicken they found in the coop had his head bitten off and guts torn out, but not eaten. Do bobcats normally just play with them? Or would they take it and eat it? We don't know. But when this chicken was killed, we were assuming it was the night that we had heard the noise. I don't know anything about bobcats, so if you could let me know and explain to me, that would be great. So, an update. I just heard that a great horned owl will do this to a chicken, which is something that we have heard out here, but not specifically seen. In fact, I was just outside on the phone, and who I was on the phone with could hear the ambulance on the turnpike going by. We were close enough to hear everything, but barely seen the turnpike, unless standing on a hill. As it was going by, our neighbor's dog was howling. The family of deer were chilling as usual. And then out of nowhere, it was like all throughout the woods, surrounding us, was this noise. At first, I wasn't panicking. It started off sounding like a bunch of geese or something taking off. Then, began to sound like people screaming for their lives. I started to panic. Even the deer were frozen with their heads up. It abruptly stopped and then started right back up, so I called my husband out to listen. And then it started to sound more clearly, like yelps. War cries, maybe? But not from a few people, not even from 20 people, but hundreds of them, all throughout the woods surrounding our house. I thought maybe coyotes, but I haven't heard that many like that. And I've read that even if it's just a few, they can make it to sound like it's a lot more. But it honestly didn't even sound like a coyote. Since being here, 2 bobcats have been caught, but even then it didn't sound anything like a bobcat. So really, I'm here to ask if it's even possible for one of those things we can't say or anything the nature of be out there, even though we really aren't even that close to any type of reservation. And if not, what could it have possibly been? It was so eerie that I'm still shaking, goosebumps, and it's echoing still in my head. I'm not one to get scared like this, but it was very bizarre. This happened not so long ago, but I haven't told anyone, simply for the fact that I didn't want to seem crazy. It was January 16th, somewhere around 9:45 when I left the house. The area I live in is small, and there's not a lot of places to hang out at. But my friend lives less than a mile away, so I decided to pay them a visit. I walked for half an hour until I came upon a ditch. I've been in this ditch multiple times during the day and night, so I didn't think anything of it when I saw it. I decided it'd be easier than following the main road, so I went inside the ditch. Worst decision of my life. About 5 minutes after I entered the ditch, I heard some twigs break, so I looked in the general direction I heard the sound in. I kid you not, I saw something run into the nearby bushes. It was skinny and gray. I freaked out and walked a little faster, but then I heard it following me. I decided to try and have a conversation with it. I talked for a bit about nonsense, about how the police would look for me if I went missing, and how people knew where I was, which of course was a lie, but what else can you do in a situation like that? I talked for about 10 minutes and then broke off into a full-blown sprint. I could still feel its eyes on me the entire time, like it had kept up with me. I felt its glare until I came up to some houses and eventually got to my friends. I don't know if it was a skinwalker or some guy who could just run incredibly fast and keep up with my every move, but that was the scariest moment of my life. I think I've had an experience and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. Me and my friend were walking towards a park to go hang out, and then we discovered this sewer system. We decided to check it out because we were stupid. There was a grate covering it, but the bars were bent open, enough that me and her could squeeze in. She had a really bad feeling about it. She's a super intuitive person when it comes to paranormal stuff, but I just ignored it further and went in. There was a big room area that the grate led into, and it had a grate on the top where light was shining through. There was a big tunnel leading right, and a small tunnel up high that I couldn't reach on the left. The room was partially filled with water at the bottom, and there was some graffiti on the walls of the tunnels. As I looked to the left, it was super dark, so I couldn't see very well. But a long ways down there was another grate, and there was some light leaking in. I could see a long lanky thing stretched out that looked like a really skinny arm. I couldn't see a body because it was further closer to me where it was darker, and I could only see it because it was in front of the light. so it was shining behind it and made it pop out. Sorry if this is worded weird, I don't know how else to describe it. It looked like an arm stretched out, and it wasn't moving. I ignored it, thinking it was probably just a plank of wood or something propped up, because there were some planks of wood in the room I was in. I decided to stack some rocks by the left tunnel so that I could reach it and look in. As I looked through the tunnel, there was another room far down the tunnel, and it had a grate on top like my room. The light was leaking in. Then I noticed this gray hunched over figure with an extremely bony body. It didn't have any clothes on or hair from what I could see. Its body looked super malnourished. I couldn't see its head or its legs since the tunnel was really small. All I could really see was its back, part of its neck, and the tops of its arms. It also wasn't moving, and by this point, I was freaking out. I went back to my friend and told her what I saw. I asked her for her phone so I could take a picture to show her, since she refused to go in there herself. I took the picture, and then we hightailed it out of there. I sadly don't have the picture because the phone it was taken on had gotten lost. We have gone back a couple of times, but never saw anything like it since. The tunnels were just empty. I think the figure were either crawlers or greys, maybe. If anyone has any information on greys, please let me know. I can't find much about them. Sorry if this is badly worded, it's pretty late. If anyone needs me to elaborate on something, I'd be happy to do so. Anyone have any idea what it is or have anything similar happen to them? Oh, a quick update for you. My friend that was just there at the time just told me some more information about the sewers. The sewers connect to the army depot that is around in the area where they do testing on animals. Maybe this is one of the test subjects. I was headed home from work at around 11 p.m. or later. I remember it was a bit on the cool side. I believe it was late fall or early winter. I was not far from the old sanitation department off the highway when I caught with my headlights a large upright creature that straddled the fence without missing a beat. The fence was near a ditch, and the fence was still about 4 feet high. The closest homes were only about a half mile down the road. This was mostly intersecting fields. A blonde Bigfoot is the closest I can get to describing what I saw that night. It made me so scared that it took hours to calm down when getting back to an empty house. I grew up on the farm and love hiking to this day. I am very observant, and in my life I have seen more than a few mountain lions, white squirrels, and even a black deer, so I pay attention and get out a lot. I have never been able to convince myself it was anything else. It was upright and appeared to be a dark blonde color in my headlights, and very fast. This happened when I was just 12 years old, and might take some backstory for it to make sense. So, at the time, I was a young girl, about to start high school. Now, I had some anxiety from the stress of changing schools, and some family trouble, which didn't make things any easier for me. So my mother is from Nova Scotia, and my father is from Europe. We were staying in a cabin in Nova Scotia. I won't say exactly where, but it was a place where we stayed almost every summer, so I was used to sleeping there. This cabin is located on the water, with another property on one side and a patch of forest on the other. This happened one day in August, but I can't seem to remember the exact date. At the time, my father was just away for the night to visit a friend, so it was just me, my twin sister, who we'll just call Annabelle, and my little brother. We'll call him Thomas, and my mother Amanda, of course, not their real names. So, I was listening to something on my iPad. I don't remember what, and looking out the window at the forest. For the longest time, it was just forest. Nothing for me to be alarmed about. But after an hour or so, I saw something in the woods. At first, I thought it was just the reflection of car headlights on the leaves, but when I kept looking at it, I realized that they were eyes, 2 large, gray, oval-shaped eyes. I didn't know what to do at first. I was paralyzed. I slowly walked away from the window, and the eyes shifted their gaze as whatever it was disappeared into the woods. I was shaken, but decided not to tell anyone, and tried to rationalize it as just being a reflection, as I had thought before. I didn't see anything else for the rest of the night, but the next morning is when I really got a scare. I was sleeping in a room with my brother and my mother, while my sister slept down the hall. It was very hot, so I was having trouble sleeping. At around 4 o'clock in the morning, I had a dream. It was one of those dreams where you are just running, but you don't really know why. Except this time, I did know what I was running from. I didn't even need to look back to know what I was running from. It was the creature from the woods, and it was chasing me on all fours from the sound of it. The dream only lasted a few seconds, but the worst part was when I woke up. My heart was beating faster than it ever had, and I couldn't open my eyes, no matter how hard I tried. It felt as though something was holding them closed. All I could hear was my heart beating, but I could also hear this other sound. It sounded like heavy, raspy breaths, mixed with shrill screaming. After about 15 seconds, that felt like 15 minutes. I could open my eyes again, but I almost wish I hadn't. When I opened my eyes, I saw a tall, 7-foot creature slowly going out the door of the room. The creature's skin was a light gray and looked not scaly, but almost like that of a frog. Its mouth stretched across its face when it opened its mouth. It opened much wider than any human could. It didn't look at me as it walked out of the room, and I just stared at it as it walked down the stairs and right through the locked front door. I didn't sleep much after that, and in the morning, I decided not to tell my family about it, since they did not see or hear the creature, and I did not want them to think I was insane. I wish I could say that that was the end of it, but this was not the last time that I saw that creature. Later that summer, we were back in our apartment. Now, our apartment looks over a street with 6 lanes, so there's almost always at least one car on that stretch of road, even late at night. So, the night this took place, it was around 11 o'clock, and I was the only one in our living room. I was going to go to bed when I noticed something unusual outside my window. The street outside was completely empty, not even a parked car. But what I did see still makes me shudder whenever I think about it. The creature from the cabin was slowly walking down the road. At first, it just walked down the road, then it stopped. Slowly, and to my horror, it turned its head up to make eye contact with me. Our apartment building has many levels, and it was at least 60 feet from our building. It met my eyes exactly. This lasted for about 5 seconds. Then, it looked away, and I ran to my bed as fast as I could. To this day, I still do not know what I saw those 2 nights, and if anyone has any idea what I saw, please let me know. I haven't seen this creature since, and I hope I never see anything like that again. Hello, I'm a 21-year-old guy from Denmark, and back in 2017, I was going for a vacation road trip in the United States. We started off in Las Vegas, where my mom visited an old woman she lived with for a year, back when she was 16, an exchange student. We then drove to LA, and then to Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, and finally, Louisiana. I was very into true scary stories. I especially enjoy cryptid, unexplained creatures and Skinwalker Wendigo stories, and I told my family about it, but my sister and her boyfriend teased me about believing in such things. My dad doesn't believe in God or superstitious or anything, but have had some strange things happen to him, so he is a little more open-minded, which my mom also, because she has had some paranormal things. When we were driving through the deserts of Arizona, my dad had to have a smoke, and we wanted to stretch our legs. We got out of the car, and my dad started smoking, and we looked around. Then suddenly, my sister says, "What is that?" and pointed towards the desert, where we immediately noticed a lion-sized, totally black cat, like it was so black that it absorbed all the light. It was just walking. It had a really long and thick tail, and it walked so weird, like it was a robot, just totally stiff legs. Then it noticed us and just froze and turned its head really fast and just stared. Then it turned its whole body, without moving its head, and started walking in our direction. Then I said that we should probably get in the car and get moving, because I wasn't staying around and waiting for it to reach us. My family quickly agreed, and we hurried to get in the car and take off. For the rest of the trip, my sister's boyfriend and my sister didn't tease me about my unexplainable creatures anymore. We were really agitated by this thing. I started to Google and search about animals that live in Arizona, and I couldn't find anything about a big feline that was black anywhere in the world. The only big cats I could find were jaguars, and it's rare they get black, and not that black. It was also much larger than a jaguar. And jaguars, cougars, or mountain lions live in forested areas, definitely not in the middle of dirt or cacti. I still think about this a lot, and I've never found an answer to what this were, and I believe even more now that there are creatures in this world that we know nothing about. So, about a year and a half ago, me and my sports team went on a camping trip in Mammoth, California for some team bonding, I guess. We weren't exactly in the middle of the woods, but definitely in the woods. We were there for about 4 nights, and on the second night, I woke up pretty abruptly. Everyone else was asleep except me. I looked at the time, and it was something like 3:15 in the morning. I laid in my sleeping bag, back for a few minutes, and shortly after I heard a sound that haunts me to this day. It sounded like a man, but it sounded unnatural. It sounded like this man, or whatever this thing was yelling through a tunnel. However, I wouldn't describe it as a yell. It sounded more like someone was talking. It had almost a supernatural echo to it that made me completely freeze. No animal could have had that kind of range to its voice. This noise was then followed by slow footsteps near my tent. I felt an overwhelming sense of fear, despite being in a tent with 5 other guys, and in another 6 guys in the other tent. In the morning, no one else seemed to have heard what I heard, and I didn't talk about it with anybody. Not sure if it could have been a skinwalker, but any explanation would be greatly appreciated. The following story you are about to hear is 100% true. Parts of this story might sound like it's from a movie, but I assure you, it all happened on the way it was to this day, and it's still a mystery of what actually happened. It was the last few minutes of class before school ended for spring break. As me and my best friend Josh were waiting for the bus to pull up to take us home, we started to talk about what we wanted to do for spring break. We talked all the way from home, playing basketball, working out, to even building our own go-karts out of scraps that his grandfather had in his old beat-down shed out back. When we finally arrived at our destination, getting ready to step off the bus, our other friend Kimberly stopped us and asked us if we could all meet up a little later that night. See, we all lived in the same area, so we decided to meet up around 11 o'clock so our parents would think we were in bed. Later that night, before we snuck out of our houses, we called Kimberly and asked where she wanted to meet at. We all decided to meet up at a little crossroads section, about 4 miles out from where we lived. The only problem is it's all single gravel road, surrounded by thick woods that stretches about 15 miles to the nearest highway. So, naturally, we were a little scared to begin with to walk by ourselves in the dead of the night in the middle of nowhere. On the way there, me and my friend Josh were talking about the old haunted slave shack that still resigned since the 1800s, about a mile to the left of where we were meeting at. As we pressed forward, my friend and I started feeling like we were being watched from a distance. Shrugging it off, we continued down the old creepy road, still talking about the slave shack. We noticed a shooting star that zoomed by the night sky. This is where the night would haunt us forever. We continued down the gravel road, still talking, when all of a sudden, we see 2 more shooting stars. then another, and another, until it looked like a machine gun was shooting stars from it. We were amazed by what we had just seen, but we finally reached our destination, seeing Kimberly sitting on the patch of grass on the side of the road. We all hugged and just sat there, talking about what we were going to do during spring break. Hours have passed, and it's now 3 a.m. in the morning, still sitting and still talking. Then out of nowhere, this unusually large dog approached us. It was a very sweet, loving, kind dog, not usual for a stray. I decided to get up and stretch my legs while Kimberly and Josh were still petting the dog. Out of the corner of my eye, I seen this dog in the distance, sitting in a very propped up way, as dogs do when they sit. But as I looked and stared at this dog, all I could see was the black shape of a silhouette. All of a sudden, I felt this eerie feeling come upon me, as if something was going to happen. I noticed the ears on this strange dog were so sharp, it looked like if you were to poke it, it would draw blood. A chilling gust of wind blew all around us as this happened, and I heard screams coming from behind me. I ran over to Kimberly and Josh and asked what had happened. They said that the dog they were petting just disappeared over the sheer drop-off on the other side of the road. Now, let me tell you that anybody or anything that fell off that side would have died, but we see nothing. And as they kept looking, I kept hearing strange noises coming from where I'd seen that creepy dog. I walked to where I was before I ran back over to see what they were screaming about, and sure enough, that creepy dog was still staring at me, and at that moment, I seen the dog's head looked up and then back at me. In that moment, a very bright beam of light lit the ground only around us. It was so bright that after the light flashed, I couldn't see anything for about a minute. Kimberly and Josh jumped up as I turned to them and asked, "Please tell me I wasn't the only one who's seen that." We all agreed it was not our imagination and decided to huddle together and try to figure out what just happened. As we stood there contemplating on what we should do, we all started to feel that feeling again, as if we were all being watched. Me and Josh started to talk about how we were going to protect Kimberly if anything was to happen. Then, out of nowhere, we turned to Kim to talk to her and noticed she was pale as a ghost, standing there, lifeless. I was facing in the other direction from both of them, then Josh started to get pale. I asked what was wrong with them, and Josh slowly, quietly said, "Dude, there is something standing about 40 feet behind you." As he told me that, chills ran down my spine through my legs, and I got weak. When I turned slowly around, scared of what I'd see, I was mortified by what I had just seen. Standing there in the bush, about 40 feet away from me, was a tall, black figure, at least 8 feet tall, and was walking towards us with a limp-like movement. The complete panic and fear blazed through our bodies. I turned to both of them and said, "Start walking home now, and don't look back." We started our 4-mile-long, frightening journey back home. Along the way there, I kept telling Josh to stay behind Kimberly and calm her down from crying with a panic. I was behind Josh because I wanted to make sure they both were in front of me, so that if anything were to happen, they could get away and get help. As we were almost home, we continued to power walk through the thick woods down the gravel road, and I started to feel that feeling again, as if someone or something was behind me. I didn't dare look back, afraid of what I might see, but continued anyway, only to hear gravel being swept away as if somebody was running at us from behind, chasing us. I told them to start running as fast as possible since we could see Josh's house in the distance. Finally, we were able to get off the gravel road and make it up the hill to his window. We quickly opened it, climbed in, relieved that this, whatever it was over. All that night, none of us slept, a single minute still wondering and frightened over what happened. We decided to let Kim sleep in the closet of his bedroom till morning, and then would walk her home. Weeks went by as it was time for school again, keeping our story a secret. We told no one of our encounter, fearing what people would think. During lunch, we agreed to start telling people what happened. and to our surprise, some people said they had experiences at the small crossroads section also. Some people say it was some sort of alien encounter. Some say it was the Grim Reaper searching for the old slave that haunted the shack nearby and would take anybody it could get. To this day, 14 years ago, we still have no answers on what or who was with us that frightening spring night. But it has haunted us to this day, and we will never forget our encounter with the supernatural. Was it an alien, or could it have been the Grim Reaper, as some people suggest? I guess I'll never know. Maybe one day I'll find out, but then again, I guess I don't want to go back to that awful place ever again. To start off, I live on the East Coast in Central Virginia, and the property I live on contains 10 acres of fields and woods. Just as some background info, the property was once a battleground during the Civil War. A historical battle took place right around where I live. My friends and I have always seen ghosts and paranormal activity around the property whenever we hang out or camp, but that isn't why I'm telling you this. I should probably mention that our campsite contains tarp roofs with pallets set up as walls. I should also mention that we always carry firearms with us in the woods, but I'm always enforceful about making sure nobody has any bullets chambered in their weapons unless they have a reason to shoot. One night, in late April, 3 friends and I were hanging out by the fire within our campsite. At about 11:30 p.m., one of my buddies and I wandered down the trail with no flashlights of any sort in the dark. We stopped at an opening by the field where we could see the stars. We chatted about random topics for about 10 minutes until we start hearing steps and twigs snapping in multiple areas in front of us. We are skeptical, but keep an ear out. Then all of a sudden, I yell, and uncharacteristically, rack a bullet in the chamber of my rifle as quick as I can. Then, I immediately aim my rifle towards what I'm seeing. It was dark, so I couldn't distinguish details, but this is what I saw. It was a pale, white silhouette. It was crawling uphill from another trail. It didn't seem intimidating though, rather intently curious. Its body moved similar to the way a chicken bobs its head, but more subtle. My friend and I yelled for our other 2 friends to come assist us as the creature got closer. We yelled louder. We weren't terrified, simply frightened and in awe. The creature went behind a tree and repeatedly poked its head out and back behind the tree. It occasionally began to crawl towards us from behind the tree, but would retreat once again. All its movement were slow and agile, and after about 2 minutes, it disappeared, as in we couldn't see it because of the brush, but it probably fled into the woods. Our other 2 friends arrived a minute or so after the creature had already fled. Their excuse was that they thought we had ran into a hunter or somebody, so they decided to take the bullets out of their weapons. Anyway, the next day we went back to the spot of the sighting, and we found disturbed leaves and tracks exactly where we saw the creature. The friend I was with during the sighting is a skilled hunter and tracker. We followed the tracks that led towards off the property until it seemed to either go cold or we lost them altogether. We did find a small-sized goat skull in the woods with no carcass to follow near the sighting area. Does anyone know what this could possibly be? The closest thing it resembles that I can think of is the rake creature.